Right.
Yeah, to John's point, I'm thinking way back to that Peter Alexander moment in the briefing room when Peter asked the President of the United States in this moment when everybody was at their most anxious about coronavirus to ease this pain a little bit of the country. What would you say to people who are scared? And he attacked Peter. To any other politician on the face of the earth, Joe, if I threw you that slow fastball over the middle, you would have crushed it over the Green Monster onto Lansdowne Street, giving a speech to the American people who were worried. And he couldn't even do that much of it. And I think the larger point, Mika, is the country is taking this incredibly seriously. You had Mitch McConnell yesterday in Kentucky giving a speech about how important it is to wear your masks, how people have an obligation to wear your mask. Sean Hannity giving a speech to his audience, wear your mask. The Surgeon General putting out videos, wear your mask. The country is taking this very seriously, and yet President Trump wants to turn the corner. He wants to move on. He wants to pretend that this isn't happening to him, as if this is about him. The country believes that this is a serious problem because 100,000 people that they know, that may be in their family, that may be someone they work with, has either died or been sick because of this coronavirus.
So you want to see how it is done? Here's Joe Biden.
My fellow Americans, there are moments in our history so grim, so heartrending, that they're forever fixed in each of our hearts, a shared grief. Today is one of those moments. 100,000 lives have now been lost to this virus here in the United States alone. Each one leaving behind a family that will never again be whole. I think I know what you're feeling. You feel like you're being sucked into a black hole in the middle of your chest. It's suffocating. Your heart is broken. There's nothing but a feeling of emptiness right now. For most of you, you weren't able to be there when you lost your beloved family member or best friend. For most of you, you weren't able to be there when they died, alone. With the pain, the anger, and the frustration, you will wonder whether or not you'll ever be able to get anywhere from here. It's made all the worse by knowing that this is a fateful milestone we should have never reached. We could have been avoided. According to a study done by Columbia University, if the administration had acted just 1 week earlier to implement social distancing and do what it had to do, just 1 week sooner, as many as 36,000 of these deaths might have been averted. To all of you who are hurting so badly, I'm so sorry for your loss. I know there's nothing I or anyone else can say or do to dull the sharpness of the pain you feel right now. But I can promise you from experience, the day will come when the memory of your loved one will bring a smile to your lips before it brings a tear to your eyes. My prayer for all of you is that day will come sooner rather than later. But I promise you it will come. And when it does, you know you can make it. God bless each and every one of you and the blessed memory of the one you lost. This nation grieves with you. Take some solace from the fact we all grieve with you.
And that is what Bobby Kennedy, in quoting a Greek poet, called the awful grace of God. That Joe Biden was given the awful grace of God through the unthinkable loss of his wife and daughter, and then, of course, his son. I think I know how you're feeling, Joe Biden said, and you weren't even able to be there when your loved ones died. I am so sorry for your loss. I can feel your pain. And then he makes that promise, Willie, that I've heard Joe Biden make to Gold Star families.
Yeah.
And that is that he said, I promise you that the day will come when their memory will bring a smile to your lips before it brings a tear to your eyes. And I pray that that day will come sooner rather than later. Listen, campaigns are about contrast, as I say all the time, as people who taught me how to campaign back when I was in my 20s. Constantly said it was about contrasts. This campaign is going to be a contrast between a man with empathy and a man with no empathy. And Americans can clearly see that. And there will be some Americans that'll say, well, at this time, we don't need a leader who's a good person. We don't need a leader with empathy. We need somebody who's tough. In fact, that's what the Trump campaign has been. That's a message they've been sending out. Now may not be the time to have a good person in the White House. Now you may just need somebody who's tough and cruel. But if you want a president who's empathetic, obviously that's Exhibit 1, that Joe Biden fits that bill.
Yeah, boy, that's a different definition of tough than I was raised to believe, going after a widower, for example, who's begging for mercy, separating families at the border, not handling a pandemic. That's not the tough I was taught.
Nothing tough about it.
No. But we've talked many times about how the president just doesn't have the empathy gene. That's not a political statement. That's just who he is. We've known him for a long time. He's not good at consoling people. He can't rise to these moments of comfort. And John Heilman, through some of the struggles that Joe Biden has had and that the Trump campaign has tried to seize on in terms of his performance, I think most political observers would agree and have agreed for a long time that he's never better than in these moments where the country needs a hug, effectively, a national hug, because he does know that pain all too well.
Right. I mean, look, I don't mean to be glib about it, but, you know, empathy is Joe Biden's superpower, right? It's the thing, I think, in this campaign, the best moments that Joe Biden had when he was running for the Democratic nomination. There's a moment in South Carolina. There were a couple of earlier moments in town hall meetings, televised town hall meetings, where he expressed that empathy that you just heard in that prepared remarks, set of remarks from yesterday, where he expressed that and related to talk to someone who had lost a wife at Emanuel AME in Charleston, for instance, you know, and connected with people on a very human level and expressed, you know, that sense of sympathy and empathy both. And that is Biden's superpower. And it is, to Joe's point, I mean, it's the central contrast in this campaign. We're going to see it over and over again. I remember back in the middle of March, right, when the pandemic was upon us but hadn't fully exploded yet, and Donald Trump did his Oval Office address the same night that Tom Hanks announced that he had the coronavirus, the same night that the NBA shut down. It was a key moment in the evolution of this story. And Joe Biden did an event in Delaware the next day that I went to, where he sort of stood up and said, here's the contrast. There was Donald Trump behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office. Here's me now showing you what it would be like if I was president. And he was a totally different picture in terms of how he talked about the virus. Now we're 2.5 months later, 100,000 people are dead. And we see again the contrast between Donald Trump yesterday attacking Twitter, trying to distract, trying to do all the crazy stuff he's done for these, and vile stuff that he's done these past few days, rather than addressing this thing head on. And then you see Joe Biden giving that speech. Joe Biden is not a perfect candidate. He's not. But this contrast is a contrast that works, I think, powerfully to his advantage in a time of economic hardship, in a time of pandemic. I think my gut is, and the polling suggests right now, that the American people are looking for a leader who has some empathy, who does feel their pain, and who will try to rebuild the economy in a way that works for them. I think that is the seam that the Biden campaign is going to drive into. And Joe is also right. The Trump campaign has new advertising up right now, just this week, that basically says, we are not for empathy. We are not for humanity. Donald Trump is a jerk. We know he's a jerk. You know he's a jerk, but he's our jerk. And his jerkiness, all of his nasty qualities are what's needed to rebuild this economy. So they're embracing the contrast, too. It's not like they're even trying to soften it. That is the contrast that's going to be on display for the next 6 months. And we'll see what the American people think come November.
Yeah, you know, Willie, though, we think about past presidents as John was alluding to. You look at Barack Obama. There were times he was not good at being empathetic. There were times that he was more of a college professor than he was a consoler in chief. But you go to Charleston and you think about him consoling that church, singing Amazing Grace. It was extraordinary. You think about George W. Bush on top of that pile after 9/11. And yeah, he was speaking to first responders, but damn it, W was speaking to the rest of the world when he said, I can hear you, we can hear you, and the rest of the world will hear you soon. And of course, a remarkable moment I always think of every time I see the possibility of a launch from Cape Canaveral when the Challenger blew up, and when Peggy Noonan wrote those extraordinary words for Ronald Reagan about touching the face of God. That's what Americans need right now, from whomever can give it to them. Maybe if this president can't do it, maybe they need it from their governors. Maybe they need it from their mayors. Maybe they can't get it from political leaders like we've gotten it from people like Ronald Reagan in the past. Maybe they get it from their priests or their pastors. But yeah, Americans want that. They want a consoler in chief, someone who understands the pain that they are going through.
Yeah, they're not going to get it here. And Peggy Noonan could write a beautiful speech, as I know she would in this moment, and hand it to President Trump across the Resolute desk. And if he delivered it, would it be convincing at this point, given the way he's conducted himself up to this day? It just wouldn't be, and that's a fact. So that moment isn't going to come from the president. As we've said several times on this show, governors are very popular right now, so the governors in their own way are delivering that message to their people, tough love, but hope at the same time. So those speeches and that message is getting out there. It's just not coming from the White House right now, and he's not setting that example. I listed some of the people who were imploring the country to wear masks yesterday at that launch you talked about. Ivanka Trump, Jared Kushner, and her children all were wearing masks. The President of the United States really is out on an island with this idea that you don't have to wear a mask, that you can turn the corner, and that the country is ready to move on. The country's just not there yet.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.